Hi, and welcome to Franklin's Garage to Stage podcast. My name is Rob Franklin, and my co-host is
Dana Thunderbase Franklin. With us today, we have a special guest. Real excited to have him on our show. His name is Connor Small, also goes by the name of Quiet Son. He's a producer and mix and mastering engineer for Grass-Fed Music. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, fellas.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for joining us. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do over there.
Yeah, so I'm a Los Angeles-based producer and engineer. I work both as an in-house producer for Grass-Fed Music, which is a artist management company, and I also work as a freelance producer with independent artists all across the country and the world. And originally from Philadelphia, I'm living in Los Angeles now, and working on music every day. It's been a blessing.
Cool. I see. Yeah, we see from your webpage you've worked with quite a few artists. Which is your most successful project to date?
I've done a couple of sync things for some TV shows like American Horror Story, some trailer things for that. Probably that's the most recognizable, but I've also had a couple independent successes with artists like Nikita and Chrissy. Very, very proud of the independent work I've done.
Awesome. So how did you get involved in your trade there? At what age did you realize that this is something you wanted to get into, and what motivated you to pursue this?
Yeah, I think for me, it was never really a decision. I think it was more something that I always wanted to do. And, as I grew up, I kind of learned the right way as far as how to produce music and like how to get into it as far as going to school and all that. But I think if you ask my parents the same question, they would say I was born this way. I used to pull all of the pots and pans out of my
same here,
my pantry and start would hit them with spoons. And I think at that point my mom and dad were like, oh, we're in trouble. We got a drummer on our hands.
I went through the exact same thing. Being a drummer, that's exactly what I did. Tupperware, pots and pans with the ladle and the spoons.
Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah, but I think I grew up in a very musical household. I was in the church choir growing up, and both my parents were singers. So they really fostered that early on. And I was very fortunate that just at different touch points in my education, kind of things were starting at the time I was there. So a couple examples of that are my high school started a recording kind of program, like a couple classes.
Cool.
When I was there. And so I got to have some exposure to that in high school, and that pushed me in the direction of doing my senior project at a recording studio that was, pretty close to where I grew up. So I was just an intern there and, a runner, just got coffee, learned how to wrap cables the right way. But even doing that very menial stuff, I was just in love with being in the studio and being around bands and artists, and just kind of wowed by the more engineering and technical side of things too. So decided to go to college. When I went to college, it was a liberal arts school, but again, just very fortunate that they happened to start a music production program there, an audio engineering program when I was a sophomore. So very quickly dropped my business major and ran to that.
That's a good combination of business and recording. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it ended up being really, really useful as I, transitioned from being somebody who always loved music and wrote music into somebody who really saw this as something that could be a professional venture.
Right. Okay. Now, I see that you work with a lot of independent artists, but do you work with any bands as well?
I do, yeah. I work with a couple of bands. For example, one run by a guy named David Kessling, and a couple others out here in Los Angeles. And so primarily I work with like more solo pop artists, but I do take on band clients whenever I can, because it's a very different experience and it's really fun.
Yeah, I bet.
Now, with when you do band stuff, do you limit the genre that you want to work with, or will you take on everything from regular rock bands to death bands, or I mean, how far would you go with that?
Yeah, I know. I really don't like to limit myself as far as genre. I think the only thing I would limit myself to is I really like to work with artists who are imaginative and who are trying to push the boundaries in whatever genre they're doing. So, for me, I listen to everything. I have a deep appreciation for all kinds of different music. So, if it's a death metal band and they're trying to bring in elements of different things and push the sonic boundaries, I think my specialty is really like bringing in different types of references and different types of genres into whatever genre the artist or the band I'm working with is. So don't try to limit myself. And I have musical ADHD basically. So I get a little bored if I'm working on the same type of thing all the time.
Nice. Now, is there any special kind of elements or process that you go through when mixing and mastering to make these bands sound different, or is there a special technique that you use?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know if I have a special technique. I don't think I'm doing anything that is revolutionary, although I would say what I always fall back onto is trusting my taste and really listening to the artists. So that's what I would say is my special sauce, is really putting the artist's vision at the forefront, doing everything I can to support that, and then really bringing in my own taste and my own kind of way of looking at the musical landscape and what lights me up. I think overall I approach mixing and production as a world building opportunity. I really love fiction and sci-fi movies and things like that. And I try to apply the fundamentals of like, how do you get sucked into a really good story into what I do? Even though it's, mixing can be very technical, I still try to approach it from like a creative world building standpoint.
Okay, cool. Now, do you have a particular studio that you work with, or you do a lot of home type engineering, or how's that process?
Yeah, both. So I have a home studio that I work out of, I would say maybe, 60 to 75% of the time. And that's just for my own convenience. But, I work out of a number of studios around LA. So I've worked out of Melrose Hills, and Girl Sound Studios on Hillhurst Ave is a great one. Various home studios that friends of mine or colleagues of mine run. Yeah, it's great. LA's fantastic. There's just a ton of different range of studios. Yeah, it's awesome.
Cool. Now, with your process of working with bands or individual people, do they per se come directly to you, or do you get references from Grass-Fed, or like me and my brother, we've been involved in bands for the last 30, 40 years, and we just recently started another project. But if we were at the point where we're ready to go into a studio and get something going, could we come to you directly, or is this something that they would have to go through like Grass-Fed or some other kind of management company?
Yeah, you can definitely come right to me. I think with Grass-Fed, they have a roster of independent artists that they're developing. So they will kind of send those artists when they think it's a good fit over to me. I'll take a listen and see if it's a good fit, and we'll work together in that capacity. But I have independent artists or label artists hit me up all the time. Most of the time I would say it's pretty informally through Instagram. People just saying, "Hey, do you have any beats?" Or I found your work on such and such platform, and I have some demos. But there's a number of ways that artists find me, whether that's through kind of the online producer, like freelancing marketplaces like SoundBetter or Instagram, or they find my website. It's always cool, but I think for me, a lot of it is referrals as well. That's how I get a lot of work.
Okay, cool. Now, I hate to date myself here, but the last time I was in a studio, it was actually on tape. It was, I believe, an 1.5 or 2-inch tape. I can't remember the size exactly, but I remember when we were finished, we had to actually pay for the master, that tape, and that was actually more expensive than the recording process. So how is that different from nowadays where everything's like digital?
Yeah, well, similarly, I don't think you're dating yourself. I also started on tape.
Okay, cool. You're much younger, so cool.
No, I remember vividly getting chastised about not being very careful with the tape. But that was also an education I got in college, was like learning how to cut the tape with razor blades and splice different sections. I wouldn't say it's a lost art form, but it's definitely not common anymore. I think one of the great things is you can do everything in the box now. And I think that in some ways democratizes things, both for people like me who are in the production world or the engineering world, but also for artists too. Because as you said, it can be a really expensive process. And I think that a lot of artists are able to come to somebody like me or, my, people who are kind of doing the same thing that I'm doing, and they're able to have a more affordable experience and still get a really, really great professional sound.
Nice.
Okay, well, since you brought up the word affordable, I'm going to ask what kind of cost is involved for somebody using your services, whether it's for a single song or a complete. Well, I guess they don't call them albums anymore. But do they?
Yeah, there's definitely still albums. I actually just wrapped an album project today, so they're definitely still in existence. I think as far as when somebody comes to me, I like to look at, I have standard rates, right? They're always changing depending on my bandwidth and, what the artist is able to swing. And that's really what's key for me is I like to keep things, unless you have a label that's giving you an advance and you have a set budget for your production or for the mix on your album. My thing is, there's so many barriers to entry to the music industry already. Like one of the things that I can control in my own world is, without sacrificing being able to put food on the table, I like to work with artists as much as I can on their budget. Because I don't think that anybody should be priced out of having a professional sound. And there's so many artists that I'm sure throughout history have been priced out. They are super talented, but if it's a choice between paying your rent or, recording a song, I can understand if the choice is rent. And so for me, I always look at a project holistically. What can the artist afford? Where's my kind of middle ground on what I can afford to, allow in terms of reductions on my price? But if they come to me, I'll look at it holistically and I'll offer production services, vocal recording, mixing, mastering. Sometimes I offer programming for live sets if they're doing, more of if they're using background tracks or maybe they're mixing in some electronic elements with a band. I like to provide a range of services and also price it in a way where the artist feels comfortable and they still feel like they're getting a really good producer and a really good sound.
Nice.
Awesome.
Now, do you do live shows as well? I mean, have you done engineering on live shows as well, or just strictly recording?
Yeah, strictly in the studio. I've never really branched out into the live engineering scene. It's a whole different beast. And I think for me, I'm a little more comfortable in the studio.
Okay, I get you.
I like to have the four walls around me.
More control. Speaking of control, say a band comes in and, they're working with you but you hear something that maybe you don't like or you'd like to change. How much control do you like to have, and what kind of, what kind of giveaway is there for, you to work with the band and the band to work with you?
Question.
Yeah, really good question. I think it's always it's a dance, right? I think for me, control is a really sticky word because I think that a lot of producers want full control, and that's just not how I approach it. I think for me, it's really more of a collaboration. As I mentioned before, it's putting the artist's vision first, right? Because they are the artists; they have that artistic instinct, right. And I like to work with the artist to maximize that artistic instinct. And when there are disagreements, when there are moments of maybe feedback needs to be delivered in terms of, hey, I think we can do this performance a little bit better, or maybe something isn't working. It's more of an examination of why isn't this working, or why aren't we feeling what we want to feel, versus you need to do it this way. Because I think for me, I'm only one person, and maybe I do trust my taste, and that's always what I fall back on. But I'm not the only person with good taste in the world, or I would say good taste, obviously. But I think it's also a learning experience for me too. Sometimes I get surprised. I think something's not going to work, and it ends up being the best part of the record. So it's always remaining open to that part of the process and making sure that the artist because a lot of artists can get discouraged very easily, and working with a producer, especially as an independent artist, can be really intimidating. I've had artists kind of look at me as like the boss of the environment, and that is very much not what I'm trying to foster. I'm very much trying to foster. I think the metaphor I always use with artists is like when I talk to them for the first time is you as the artist are in the driver's seat. I'm riding shotgun. I'm looking at a map. I'm telling you all the different ways we can get to your destination. Maybe this one's the fastest, but this one's maybe a little more scenic. And you get to decide, do we take the scenic route or do we get on the highway and just floor at 100 miles an hour and get there as fast as possible?
I like that.
Yeah, it is a good analogy.
Thank you.
And I can tell, you're compassionate for it as well. Now, I've only recorded in a studio twice. Both scenarios were live, where we were all playing at the same time. But one was all the instruments were in isolation booths, and the other was in the same room. How do you approach like live type recordings?
We'll be back after a quick break.
Live recording is fun. I think there is definitely a magic that can happen when you have a band that's tracking together in the room. Now, obviously, like there are technical limitations to what you can do there, right?
The bleed over and all that, right?
Yeah, I think for me, like always having the drum room feel big, but somewhat contained. Like you want it to feel like there's some energy and vibe coming from that particular room.
Right.
And having the bassist be in there is really helpful because you have that rhythm section syncing up.
And that's what we are basing it on, so we get it.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I think I'm very bottom up when it comes to production. So I always want to make sure that the rhythm is hitting first. As well
that's my
as
next
vocals.
question. Thank you.
I love you already.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important, right? Like whenever I'm tracking something that is live, and I think this applies to electronic recording too, but the rhythm is the most important part to me outside of the vocals, because that's the first music anybody made, right? It's like we're sitting around a fire,
rocks
hitting
against
drums, rocks against stick, yeah, clapping, hitting our thighs. Those are the most. I think that's the essence of music. Vocalizing on top of those rhythms it's a communication, and so you communicate a lot with the rhythm. I think that everything has to start there, and then it can be a challenge if you have a lot of session musicians coming in and they're trying to slot themselves into that. But I think as long as the rhythm is working, it's very easy for other musicians to pick up what's going on. So I always start from there.
Cool. Very cool.
Okay, so here's a scenario for you, and say you've got a full band coming in, they want to do some studio work and stuff down, and you're on board with everything they're doing, but say there's one member of the band that's just not quite cutting it, or maybe isn't up to par the rest of them. Do you suggest to the other members, hey, we can replace this guy, just on the work, and if you want to do stuff with them live, fine. But I mean, how would you approach something like that where you have maybe one member that's just holding the rest of the guys back?
Yeah, I mean, the studio environment can be very different than a live environment. So you may have somebody who gets a little, for lack of a better word, like a little gun shy or a little nervous when they're in the studio. So my first instinct is to always go to that person privately and have a conversation with them and just be like, hey, like just checking in with you. How you feeling? Do you need anything? I think the way I approach my role as a producer when I'm in the studio is, obviously there's personality management that can happen, but I think, making sure that, yeah, I think it's like, you never want to cause a situation where somebody's going to feel embarrassed or tempers are going to flare. That happens, of course, right? And that's,
Right,
you
right.
can manage those situations. But I think going to somebody privately and being like, encouraging them, right? Like, I know you can do this. Like, you wrote this part, right? You can definitely do this. Or do you want a little help or a little, maybe I can give it a shot and we can kind of work on it together. I think that's the first way to approach it. Now, if it's really not working, I think then it's still a private conversation of like, hey, how do you feel about bringing somebody in for this? I know you can play it, but maybe it's just an off day, right? We're humans. We have our off days.
Good way to approach it.
Yeah. Michael Jordan didn't score, 80 points every game, right?
Right.
He had his games where he scored 10 or 20, right? So, I think it's really about giving grace to people, meeting them where they're at. If somebody does need to be replaced, it's making sure that you have buy-in from the whole band and that, because they're still going to go out and perform together, maybe tour together. You don't want to leave a bad taste in anybody's mouth through the studio. And you also don't want to let anybody domineer from other band members. Like, you don't want the singer coming in, unless it's the singer's band and everybody's in agreement that the singer called the shots. You don't want somebody kind of dictating what's going on. And that's a big part of being a producer as well, is managing the personalities.
Yeah, like I said, that's got to be the hardest part, managing personalities. In fact, we just had this discussion on our last podcast about, how a band is really like a marriage, and it's got to be more of a democracy rather than, one person calling the shots. And so that's an important part of being a band. But my question to you is for new artists, because we're called Garage to Stage, so we're kind of trying to encompass the whole process. But for new artists, like maybe just starting out, what would be your advice to them getting to the point to where they should record?
Yeah. I think the first thing I would say is trust yourself. You make the music you make for a reason. So always trust your artistic vision, but also be open to feedback, constructive feedback. Be open to community, bring people in, don't be afraid to work with other people. You might, I think it can be kind of like dating, like with producers, with band members, like you might need to go through a couple of different quote unquote relationships to find the one that sticks. It can be nerve-wracking putting yourself out there, but I think that's the first thing, is really trust yourself, be open to community. The second thing is find somebody who is going to believe in you, find somebody who's going to meet you where you're at and help you grow, whether that's a manager, a producer, a band member. You want to have somebody that is going to see your vision, maybe see how that vision can be achieved if you don't yourself, and support you on the way getting there. And then lastly, just from a technical perspective, as far as like, when do you know it's time to go to the studio? I think it's time to go to the studio when you have songs that you really believe in and need to record. I think if you're unsure about a song, don't go to the studio yet. Refine it, work with somebody, bring in a songwriter. If your gut's telling you, hey, I don't know what I want to do in terms of recording this song, just wait. It can be recorded later. But if you have songs that you're like, God, I'm dying to get these recorded and I'm dying to put them out because I believe in them, I believe in myself, that's your indication.
Good advice.
Oh, awesome. Good advice. So, in everybody's point in their career, they always have their one special moment where like the light bulb goes on and it hits them. It's like, oh shit, this is what I was meant to do, or kind of like the pinnacle of your career. Have you had a moment like that?
I think I've had several.
Good.
Good.
Yeah. I don't know if that will ever stop for me, because I think it's this is a very like passion driven career for me. But I think one moment that really stands out to me is when I first graduated college and I moved to New York. I was both working on some solo stuff as an artist, learning how to produce, and I was in a duo where I was producing most of the tracks, although we were co-writing and my band member, was also doing some production. And I think the light bulb moment for me was when that duo ended and I felt fine. Not fine because I wasn't, sad to see that kind of phase end or to see that project end, because I was, but I felt fine because I, through that process, had learned not only like I can do this as far as producing music, but also I felt so lit up by it. I felt so fulfilled by it that I was like, oh yeah, I can do this for myself, but I can also do this for others. I can help others have that feeling. And that's what really drove me to fully pursue production, because, there were so many things that were saying to me, like, I was working at a record label at the time. You could just work in a record label. You could stay there and be in the music industry. But I wasn't getting that same feeling of being really like fulfilled and lit up. It was a day job. It was a cool day job, but it was a day job.
Yeah, it is a cool job.
Yeah. But I think that was the aha moment for me, was like, okay, this thing that I was putting a lot of energy into fizzled out, and I had to step away, and feeling fine about that and feeling confident in that really pointed me in the right direction.
Cool. Well, you do have an impressive resume. Are we able to take things from your website and put it on our podcast website as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything on my website is released, so please feel free to include any songs you feel gravitating towards.
Cool. Thank you. Now, if somebody wanted to approach you after listening to this, what's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, you can definitely find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Quiet Sun Music. You can reach out to me over email. I have a website form on my website, quietsun.com. You can fill out all your project details and get in touch with me directly. I would say those are the best places to reach me.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so Quiet Sun, there's got to be some kind of backstory to that.
I was going to ask you that.
Where does that come from? Is that like a family thing, or is that just something you came up with? Tell us the story on that.
Yeah, no, I don't know if there's any like huge story or meaning behind it, but it's, when I first started out, I was producing under a moniker called Husks, and that was like, I was making really dark industrial music, and I was really into horror movies. And it it was something I think for me at the time was embodying this like very dark, brooding side of me, but it wasn't a complete picture. And I struggled with it for a while. And I also realized like people weren't really getting it. And I had to have some really hard conversations with myself about like, okay, what identity am I trying to put out there as producer and as an artist? Because I do still record and release my own music.
Cool.
And Quiet Sun just kind of came to me because I think I was always a shy kid. I was always a quiet kid.
Now, do you have a brother? There's one. Is that why?
I have a sister.
Okay.
I have a sister. She's 8 years older than me. So in some ways, I did have a lot of alone time as a kid, because I think when she went to college, I was 8 or 9. So I was a quiet kid, and I think what Quiet Sun communicates to me, and what I found that people really understand about it when they read my bio and kind of connect that all, is that there's a softness and an empathetic way that I try to approach production. And I think that moniker really communicates that out. Like, this is a place where you can kind of come as an artist, be seen, be taken care of as far as like bringing something really powerful or painful into your music, and know that somebody's going to have the empathy to sit across from you and understand that and work through that process of putting it into a song, which can be really delicate. So yeah, I think overall it's really just trying to communicate to people that this is a space of softness and quietness.
Cool. Well, you sold me. I'd love to work with you. Hey, I've got one more question.
Work with you guys.
Okay, I've got one more question for you. Recording practices. We're a band, obviously. So, what would be your advice for bands in, like, say, maybe a limited room for just recording practices? Basically for your own use, to look for areas to be improved on.
Yeah, areas to be improved on in terms of just how you record, or
just overall like sound. Like, say maybe like we spend a lot of time with our mix to make sure it sounds good before we even play, obviously, so we can hear each other at the right levels. But if we want to record our practices to see, just basically to listen for mistakes or see what's working and what isn't working, what would your advice be for basically the mix of a room? And maybe say a small room, like 20 by 20 type size room.
Yeah, sound treatment is very important. You want to make sure that you're not having any spots, especially if you're recording like drums or guitar that have some of those really high mid frequencies. You want to make sure that any reflection points are taken care of. And there's some programs and microphones you can buy that can help you find those reflection points so that you can put that sound treatment in a way that's unique to your room. I think ear training is really good. There's a website, I think it's called Ear Gym or something like that. But it basically gives you listening exercises and it can help you train your ear. So I do see that as something that can be really helpful as far as like understanding if the mix is off or if something isn't quite sitting right. You can kind of identify, oh, it's coming from these low mids and maybe the guitar needs to be lowered an octave or the bass needs to fill a little bit more space. And then, the other thing as far as just hardware or software, it's like really learning how to use EQs and really learning how to use compressors, at least a basic fundamental understanding. Right. That can also take recording to another level because it will add just a little bit of more control dynamically and control frequency wise to your recordings. Okay. I think you can go a long way with EQ and compression.
Yeah. Cool. So if, say a solo artist or band, they want to work with you, especially after hearing this podcast, they're like, oh, this guy sounds awesome. And, say down the road, we get our stuff, really tight and we want to, give you a call. At what point, I mean, would an individual or a band need a manager to approach you first, or can they just come to you and say, hey, we want to do this. We don't have any management. We just want to do this on our own. Is that something that's approachable? And then the other part of that question would be, what are the legal ramifications? I mean, as far as, legal ownership of the rights and licensing and all that goes with it. How do you approach that?
Yeah, you definitely do not need a manager to reach out to me, nor a lawyer. You can just hit me up directly and work with me. I promise I'm a approachable guy. But I think I work with artists of the entire spectrum of the music industry, like somebody who is just starting out and has no idea what a producer does or how to make a song, all the way up to people who are signed to labels and, the whole gamut in between. So it's the kind of thing where you can reach out to me directly and I treat every artist the same. I look at every project individually and give that project what it needs. So sometimes it's, I need to produce and mix and master the whole song. Sometimes it's, hey, we just need an extra set of eyes or ears on this. Can you come in and just add a couple things? As far as legal ramifications, I always think it's good to have a producer agreement. That way, just everything is above board. You know what the terms are. I think there's a couple of things. Split sheets and producer agreements are good. Split sheets are always a negotiation as far as what you as the artist are comfortable giving up. Sometimes
what is that exactly?
So a split sheet is basically what artists and producers and songwriters use to determine what percentage of the song each person who worked on it controls. Okay. Industry standard for a producer is 5 points, and 5 points essentially means 20% of the artist's share of the track. So in a situation where you have a label, you have multiple songwriters, the artist might be taking, let's say, 18% of the track. Within that, typically they're giving up 20% of that to a producer. Now, I don't always do that. It's a little more simple when you don't have a label. With independent artists, I've done 50-50 splits if there's no fee involved. So it's always a negotiation as far as like, how much are you paying me up front? How much do you feel comfortable giving up? I'm never going to demand a certain amount, but we will have a conversation around what feels good for everybody. if you have songwriters in the room, we always have to have a transparent conversation around what contribution was added. Normally, I try to keep things equal and equitable between all the people in the room. Make sure everybody's voice is heard and everybody feels adequately compensated. Now, if you have a manager, that they're going to take care of the bulk of that, but again, they should be involving everybody in the conversation.
Okay.
Producer agreements, it's really just setting forth the terms of the work that we're doing. Am I producing an album for you? Am I producing a single? How much am I charging you? When are the payments due? How do I deliver your files? What are my expectations and your expectations as far as the cadence of how often we're meeting? As well as like, if we do need to split, if you do want to go in a different direction, or I want to go in a different direction, what are the terms of how we split? Okay. So it really just keeps everybody protected and all the information about board.
Cool. And one more thing I want to ask, and now that we got all these questions about all the formality stuff down, loosen this up a little bit. And everybody's had a moment in their in their career where it's either really mostly embarrassing, something we're like, oh shit, I can't believe I really did that. Tell us about something that, maybe you're producing something and it didn't quite go as planned, or you forgot to hit the record button or something like that. I mean,
no shit moment.
Yeah, there's got to be a moment where you're like, oh damn, I wish today never happened.
We've had quite a few of those.
Oh yeah, we all have. Oh man, where do I even start? I mean, I was producing a writing camp last year, maybe it was the year before, I can't remember, but I'm the main producer. I'm also engineering. We got 50 different artists and songwriters cycling in and out of the room, and I show up to the studio, and thank God I showed up early, because I come in and I'm like, oh fuck, nothing's set up. Sorry, can I curse?
That's all right.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I realized, oh man, like there's no intern, so I have to figure this out on my own. There's just nothing is working, and having to kind of troubleshoot that. And for the first, I would say hour of the day, just everything that could go wrong was going wrong. Like the mic preamps weren't working, the compressor was shut off.
Oh damn!
My laptop was having issues, and I was like, man, this is just not my day. Eventually we found another producer who could come in and troubleshoot some things with me, and we got it all sorted. But I think it's moments where you feel like, okay, people are kind of counting on me to figure this out. It's a new environment and you can't quite exactly get it. And, this is why we have interns and assistants who are familiar with the space. But, I think that was an oh shit moment. And I think also just, reflecting on the question about contracts and things like that, my own personal experience, and I'll share this for any artists who are listening who might be intimidated by contracts. I think it's always a good thing to have a lawyer take a look at things. I got into a contract when I was much younger with an artist marketing firm, and I won't say the name of it, but an oh shit moment for me was when I realized I signed this agreement and they're not doing anything. They're not doing any work. And I had to essentially buy out the agreement and move forward from that. But it was no shit moment, because I learned a lesson of I, as an artist, wanted to have my music promoted, and I didn't do enough vetting to make sure that it was the right situation for me. Now, luckily, I continued to follow up, and I continued pushing them to do the work that they said they would do in the contract. They gave me the bare minimum, didn't even fulfill the terms of the contract. But that was no shit moment for me, because I was like, I really wish I had done a little bit more research and not trusted so readily. So I'm not saying artists shouldn't trust, but they should definitely do their research, do their homework, have conversations with people.
Makes sense.
And trust your gut before you put anything in writing.
Okay, good advice. Now, in closing, I know you're a busy guy, so I don't want to take up your whole afternoon here. But I noticed that you're nominated for the best mixing and engineering for Hollywood Independent Music Awards. Are there any other awards that you've been nominated for?
I don't think so. I think that's the main one. I tend to be a little shy about submitting. I happened to be encouraged to submit by the artist I was working with, and also my fiance was very supportive in me doing that. So, you're making me realize I should probably submit to some more things.
Okay.
All right.
Well, really appreciate your time, Connor, and also, as your name implies, Quiet Son. And it's been a pleasure. You've given us some really great advice. In closing, is there anything else you'd like to say to new or artists that are ready to hit you up?
Yeah, no, I think the music industry is a really, really great place. Like anywhere, it has its problems. So I think just, as I said before, trust yourself, be open to new experiences, make the best music you can make. And when you're ready to jump into the studio, find a producer and an engineer that you really trust. And It's going to be a super fun process, and just enjoy it, because, recording is special. There is a magic in being in the studio, and that's why I do it as a career. So, yeah,
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you very much. And like I said, we'll include your all your social media contacts and your website and your picture as well on our website, if you don't mind. And again, thank you.
Of course.
We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you guys. This was a pleasure.
All right. Well, you have a great rest of your day, and talk to you later.
You too. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Well, that was a good interview with that guy. He was very, very educational, and gave us some really good advice. And any of you aspiring musicians out there, it's good. Like he said, do your homework with the producers and management. And once you get to that level, trust your instinct on these people. And when you get talking to them, you'll know if it's a fit or not. And so I appreciate all the advice from him, and thank you again for listening. And please don't forget to hit us up on our site, and anybody who wants to contribute to the show. This is a 2-man show, and it takes a lot of work and some financial means on our end to put this together, and we'd love to keep doing it for you. So please contribute if you can. A couple of bucks a month is all it takes, or a big lump sum if you got some extra money hanging out. We'll take a big check from you too. So what do you got to say, bro?
Well, I'd like to thank everybody again for listening, and do check out our website, because I will, in our contributors page, put Quiet Son's bio and his picture and basically all his accomplishments. And he's got the links to all the artists he's worked with, and there's some great stuff on there. It's not really our cup of tea because it's more pop, but it shows his expertise in the field. So yeah, once again, thank you, and everything Dana said was like perfect. So thank you very much, and please do continue to listen. Thank you.
All right. Cheers.
All right. Bye.